From the very first punch, Sifu is utterly uncompromising in its design. Absolver developer Slowclap's latest martial arts beat-em-up is bold, its combat exquisite, its animation top-notch, its music outstanding, and its story, while very simple, is poignant and elegantly told. It's also unforgiving and unapologetic, with pockets of frustrating moments during which I was certainly not in my happy place.
Damn it!
But by the end, Sifu offered me a nearly unparalleled sense of mastery and accomplishment, and I can't imagine I would have enjoyed it half as much if it pulled its punches. Sifu begins, as so many revenge-fueled martial arts stories do, with a murder. Your father and martial arts master is killed right before your eyes in what is quite simply one of the best prologue chapters I've played in recent memory. 8 years later, you set off on a journey to kill each of the 5 people involved. It's a very simple premise, but it's executed wonderfully. You begin with very little information about your targets, but over the course of the campaign, you start to piece together who they are and what they're all about by collecting clues and evidence throughout each level. I found myself uniquely motivated to seek out each of these clues, not only because of the additional lore and context about the main character's quest for vengeance that they provided, but also because finding one could potentially unlock doors in previous levels that would lead to entirely new sections. Plus, the way new information is added to a detective board showing how everything is connected is a nice touch. Sifu's martial arts combat is among the best I've ever played, plain and simple. The camera does sometimes get squished in the corner and makes it hard to see what's coming, but apart from that, it's hard to find many faults. I can't say enough good things about how smooth the animation is, how every hit lands with bone-crunching impact, and how every single counter looks natural no matter what angle an attack comes from or what type of strike is thrown. And that's just talking on a purely surface level. Mechanically, it's just as impressive. There's a light attack, a heavy attack, a guard button for blocks, parries, and sways, a button to vault over objects, a button to pick up weapons, a button to throw weapons, and a button to enter a focus mode for a variety of unblockable attacks tied to your focus meter. While the hand-to-hand fisticuffs are great, Sifu really sets itself apart from other beat-em-ups through its use of environmental combat. Stunned enemies can be thrown downstairs, through barricades, and even over railings for instant kills.
Alright then.
Weapons can be kicked up directly from the ground into a thug's face, and there are all sorts of contextual takedowns that seamlessly incorporate your surroundings into their animations. More than just being really freaking cool, it all offers a strategic advantage as well. This fight right here seemed impossible to make it through unscathed, but once I did some scouting of the environment, I was able to lure enemies up here and just toss them off the edge. Sifu is full of moments like these that reward thinking about combat in ways beyond just punch, block, and dodge. But more than anything, it's the defensive options that really make Sifu sing. Much like in Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, there's a structure meter that governs the guards of both you and your enemies. If you block too many hits, the structure meter will break, and you'll be in for a bad time. To avoid that, you can hold the block button and move the stick up or down to sway out of the way of either high or low attacks. You can also attempt to parry an attack by tapping the block button right when it's about to hit. Each defensive technique has its own use. Blocks require zero timing and will keep you from taking too much damage at the cost of your structure meter. Sways will restore your structure meter and are especially effective at the end of an enemy's combo string, but run the risk of being mistimed or swaying in the wrong direction. And parries will halt an opponent's combo dead in its tracks, giving you an opportunity to counterattack, but have incredibly strict timing. It's great that the enemy AI in Sifu is aggressive enough to really force you to master these deep defensive mechanics. They do not just hang around and wait for their turn. They will leap in, attempt to surround you, toss bottles, leap over bar counters and smash you with an axe kick, and just generally put up a very tough fight across all levels. Slowclap finds this really nice balance where the enemies are just predictable enough where you can learn to recognize certain combos coming your way and plan a defense off that first hit, but there's also just enough variation in their attack patterns where you could be caught off guard if you lose focus. On paper, Sifu is actually a very short game. Its 5 levels can be completed in just a handful of hours, even right from the first time you start a new save file. I would be very impressed if you actually managed to pull that feat off on your first playthrough. It took me about 10 hours to reach the end for the first time, but it isn't impossible. More than likely, you'll die along your quest, and the way Sifu handles death is truly unique. With the help of a magical talisman, you'll be able to revive right from where you keeled over and continue fighting, but you'll age up by however many years your current death counter is at. So while your first few deaths may only age you up by 1, 2, or 3 years, if you continue dying to the same enemy or boss, you'll quickly find yourself aging by 5, 6, 7 years or more each time you go down. The only way to decrease it is to defeat some specific and tough enemies, which naturally poses its own risks of making it go higher in the process. The aging isn't just for show either. Every time you age 10 years, your maximum health will shrink, but you'll deal a little more damage, as your body becomes more frail but your skills and experience become sharper. Once you hit your 70s, the magic of your talisman will run out, and the next time you die, it's game over. Here's where things get tricky though. You can restart a level and try again, but you'll maintain the skills, age, and death counter of your best playthrough of the previous level. So if I barely scrape by against the boss of the second level at age 65, every time I restart the third level, I will be 65 years old and only have 2 lives for the rest of the campaign, unless I dramatically manage to reduce my death counter, which is not easy to do. Obviously not an ideal scenario. Basically what that means is it's not enough to just beat a level. You need to beat the level and have enough of a lifespan left over so that you can realistically tackle everything after it. This is the one pain point in Sifu's design. Similar to a roguelike, it demands that you replay levels repeatedly until you're able to basically master them. But unlike a roguelike, there's no procedural level generation or randomized loot to alleviate some of the repetition involved with playing the same levels over and over again. You always have the same weapons, the same enemies, and the same bosses to contend with. Now that isn't to say that I would have preferred procedural levels, because Sifu's handcrafted ones are bursting at the seams with creativity and style. However, the emphasis on repeated playthroughs feels at odds with how static everything is, resulting in some tiring repetition. Mercifully, there are shortcuts that you can unlock on subsequent playthroughs, so you'll rarely ever have to play an entire level over again. In one particular stage, you're able to pretty much just beeline straight to the boss once you fought her for the first time. But in other cases, like the second level in particular, you'll still have to play through 10 to 20 minutes before you even get a chance to attempt the boss again. I know that all sounds bad, and surely it was a substantial hump that I needed to clear. But once I did, I truly fell in love with the masterful combat and moment-to-moment gameplay of Sifu. Not to mention the excellent dynamic soundtrack, the cool ways it uses ambient noises from the controller's speakers, and its gorgeous watercolor art style. You begin Sifu with all the skills that you need to get to the end. A handful of basic combos, a sweep that can knock enemies down, a grab against grounded foes that lets you deal 2 quick strikes to them and then pick them back up on their feet, a push that shoves enemies away from you, and an eye-poking focus attack. In addition to those basic skills though, every time you die, or every time you find a shrine that offers a number of buffs that you can purchase for that run, you get an opportunity to add new skills to your repertoire to give you some situational advantages. That includes options like the ability to catch incoming projectiles, a counterattack that can be used while you're on the ground, or a ducking strike that lets you slip under a high attack to punch an enemy straight in the crotch. The catch is that when it's game over, all of your skills reset to 0. There is some roguelite style persistent progression though, in that you can make a skill a permanent fixture on your loadout once you've bought it a total of 6 times. So you need to make a choice on any given run about whether you want to spend your points doubling down on a skill that you really want for future playthroughs, or spread your experience around to give you the best possible chance on that particular run. I find myself torn on this because on the one hand I do think that it's a well-designed progression system given Sifu's unique take on death and its focus on replaying its levels, but at the same time most of the skills are so situational that I often found myself spending hard-earned XP on a skill that I never got an opportunity to use, or a skill that never really provided any sort of new solution for a problem that I was facing at the time. Having that duck and groin punch move is cool, but it feels redundant when I can already duck under attacks and counterattack to stun an enemy. There are a handful of exceptions, but many other skills follow suit in that they're cool attacks that aren't really any more useful than your core set of abilities. Sifu demands a lot from you, and that's a sword that cuts both ways. Its combat is impeccable, with incredibly smooth and impactful animation, deep fighting mechanics, and challenging enemies that really make you fight tooth and nail for every victory. At the same time, the repetition that comes from replaying the level so you can essentially set a high score and give yourself a chance at completing the rest of the short campaign with what's effectively one persistent pool of lives can lead to some really frustrating moments with no clear path through outside of just trying and trying until you get better at it. On the other side of that vicious learning curve though, is one of the most impressive beat-em-ups I've ever played, with excellent level design, fantastic music, and, once it was all over, a sense of accomplishment and satisfaction that few other video games can provide. For more Sifu, check out the first minutes of the game, and for everything else, keep it here on IGN.